Okay, guys, I'm on and I'm back reading Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. If anybody shows up and they want to chat, then I'm happy to do that. I'm reading a little bit of chapter 2 from the book. And the reason I'm doing this is it's Mental Health Awareness Week or month in the USA, week in the UK. And what I'm finding is that the more psychoeducation people have around childhood trauma and what complex PTSD is, a lot of people can think they have anxiety, but they've actually had a really tough childhood and maybe some abuse. And what's really playing out are flashbacks as an adult. And we can often, some of us have had heavy abuse and some people have had lighter abuse, but it's still abuse, but people don't put two and two together and realize that anxiety can be to do with childhood trauma that's not being dealt with or unresolved. So the whole purpose of this is that as I share, people can go back over the previous 8 days that I've been on, and the information I'm putting out there, I think will be useful to at least somebody who may be having flashbacks or triggers. So if you know anybody who is, please share this with them. And also, I will now read from chapter 2. I had it open on the page, but now I've lost it. I'm going to read from chapter 2 of Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. And I'm not reading the whole chapter. I'm just going to read a bit of it. And what Pete Walker says here, this is about levels of recovering with complex PTSD. He says, healing from complex PTSD is above all complex. This is important to emphasize because there are numerous one-dimensional approaches to trauma that bill themselves to cure all ails. In my opinion, however, singular approaches are unable to address all the levels of wounding that combine to cause PTSD, CPTSD. Moreover, working with simplistic approaches can have you stranded in toxic shame when you do not achieve the touted results. I was motivated to write this book in large part because many of the times I sank into the new levels of self-contempt when the latest therapy did not cure me. So I'll give you an example. I didn't realize, like, there are things that I've done, in spirituality. I did the totality of something called the Course in Miracles, thinking that was going to heal my childhood wounding and get me into a place of forgiveness, and thinking that my trauma was the reason that I was suffering is because I couldn't forgive. But we can see as adults that forgiveness is really, with heavy duty trauma, that is not really what we're dealing with. We're having to deal with our own grieving and our own healing process as adults because we've lost out maybe on childhood, we've lost out on nurturing and stuff like that. I'm going to continue reading. He says, I will use the word key repeatedly to describe the various tasks upon which recovering hinges. This book offers a key chain of perspectives and techniques to unlock yourself from being what Alice Miller called a prisoner of your childhood. So I think some people can relate to that, and I'll continue reading this bit. Abusive and abandoning parents can injure and abandon us on many levels: cognitive, emotional, spiritual, physical, and relational. And to recover, you need to learn how to support yourself to meet your unmet development needs on each level that is relevant to your experience of childhood trauma. This chapter is a brief overview of many tasks involved in CPTSD recovery. These tasks are explored at greater length in part 3. The comprehensive table of contents at the beginning of this book will direct you to further information on each of the topics covered in this chapter. He says, please allow yourself to use the table of contents to explore sections of the book that pique your interest. So going on in this book, because I'm not reading the whole thing, I'm going to go to Shrinking the Inner Critic, because the whole point is, with complex PTSD, is to get to the level of realizing that we have an inner critic that is stopping us functioning normal in day-to-day life. And what we can do is begin to monitor and get mindful about the thoughts and things that we're saying to ourselves. Because, for instance, if you go into a flashback and then you think that there's something wrong with you, and then you berate yourself for having a memory that's giving you a reaction, or you get triggered and you berate yourself for being triggered, then you're not going to heal. The way we heal the inner critic is with healthy anger, healthy blame, and looking at what actually happened that's bothering us, and then beginning to dig deep. And Carl Jung looked at this work as well, but not CPTSD, but looking at the shadow side. So the depth of our pain and the wounding, so that we can begin to resolve and begin to live a life that's not lived out in pain each day, because that's what happens for a lot of us. We end up not being able to take care of ourselves properly, and we isolate, and that's not the way to go. Or people may turn to drugs or alcohol or codependency. I mean, there's so many problems that are created through complex PTSD, which is not a disorder, but a reaction to childhood trauma. So I'm going to continue, and I'm going to read about shrinking the inner critic. So what we have is early abuse and abandonment forces the child to merge his identity with the superego, the part of the child's brain that learns the rules of his caretakers in order to get and maintain acceptance. However, because acceptance is impossible in the complex PTSD endangering family, the superego gets stuck, working overtime to achieve the impossible, perseverating on finding a formula to win over her parents. The child eventually embraces the perfectionism as a strategy to make her parents less dangerous and more engaging. Her one hope is that if she becomes smart, helpful, pretty, and flawless enough, her parents will finally care for her. So we can see what the issue is here, but I'm going to continue reading. But clearly the words spelling it out, what complex PTSD, how it affects us. It says, sadly, continued failure at winning their regard forces her to conclude that she is fatally flawed. She is loveless, not because of her mistakes, but because she is a mistake. She can only see what is wrong with or missing in her. Anything she does, says, thinks, imagines, or feels has the potential to spiral her down into a depressed abyss of fear and toxic shame. Her superego fledges into a full-blown trauma-inducing critic. Self-criticism then runs non-stop in a desperate attempt to avoid rejection, inducing mistakes. Drasticizing becomes obsessive to help the child foresee and avoid punishment, and worsening abandoned. At the time, it continuously fills her psyche with stories and images of catastrophe. The survivor becomes imprisoned by a jailer who will accept nothing but perfectionism or perfection. He is chauffeured by a hysterical driver who sees nothing but danger in every turn of the road. Chapter 9 and 10 focus extensively on practical tools for shrinking your inner critic. So I've read that bit there, and I'm going to probably in the coming 2 weeks read from this book, which is the other book of Pete Walker, which is called The Tao of Fully Feeling, which was written before Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. But we'll stick here for the moment. So if anybody's out there and wants to say anything and has any questions on it, I'm happy for people to email me, because I do know that on videos like this, where it's childhood trauma or sexual abuse or physical abuse as a child or violence, a lot of people don't want, family members maybe to know what they're watching. So I'm happy for people to private email me, and the link or the details will be below the video when it's uploaded properly. I'm going to look at my list here. So the reason I came into this was because of my own childhood trauma, which was quite serious, very serious. And I then trained in faster EFT tapping, And with that, I managed to calm down a lot of my anxiety. But after reading Pete Walker's book, Complex PTSD, I realized that I had layers to deal with, layers and layers. And I had to get to a place of getting rid of the inner critic, which was one, by telling it to bugger off and not have it attack me anymore and not berate me. That's self-talk that goes on in the head. And then on top of that, I then began to grieve, and I began to healthy anger and healthy blame. And that means that we begin to put the blame back where it came from, and we can work out our anger, but healthy anger when people are abusive is really healthy. It's healthy to feel angry. It's not healthy to, bypass feelings on any level. It's really important. In spiritual circles, people can suggest that we just forgive, or in religious circles, people can suggest we forgive. But we can look at the Catholic Church as an example of late. How do all of these children who've been abused, and also people who've been in children's homes, myself one, it's like where there is abuse going on, and we have authority figures that are supposed to be taking care of us, particularly as children. We have no power, we have no say. We can't just go and do our own thing or move out, or we have to live. It's like being imprisoned, and we have to live with the circumstances that we're given. So via my experience, and, I've gained a lot of wisdom, and from lots of reading Pete Walker's work, a lot on complex PTSD, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of videos on narcissism and such like, and Jordan Peterson and, Carl Jung, his work and his books. So as a result of that, I feel that it's my duty to be of service and put this information out to people who are in recovery, who want to recover, who want to stop bypassing, and who want to understand what's happening to them. And also below this video, I'm going to put from Pete Walker's website, there are 14 inner critic attacks that he points out, which are useful to look at that list, because then you will be able to see what's going on and what we do to ourselves unknowingly. And I didn't know what I was doing until I read this book. He's also got 13 steps for recovering from flashbacks, which is a brilliant list. And it's, it becomes natural. The more you read the list, it becomes natural. You catch yourself and you can get rid of the inner critic. And also it's important that we have a voice and that we're able to speak up and speak our truth without any toxic shame, because there's a lot of toxic shame within families that don't want to hear what happened in the past, and the people that have been through abuse are very much left on their own to get on with it. There's very little true support out there in the world, in my opinion. So psychoeducation is the key to healing at deep levels. And once we get to a point, we eliminate the inner critic, we allow the healing to start taking place. We get rid of the guilt, any guilt and shame, and social beliefs that, societal beliefs that, hold no water when it comes to child abuse. Allowing healthy anger and blame, healthy self-regard. It leads to healthy self-regard when we have healthy anger and blame. And it doesn't mean we do it forever, but we have to go through a period. And that also means that we're grieving. We'll begin to grieve when we get angry. And then we're protecting our inner child. And then we are releasing toxic shame, and we get to verbally ventilate. And it's important we have people we can relate to, who understand us. And then so that's it, basically. That's my little time for today. And we've got to really think about how with the inner critic, like how would we respond to a child that's been through abuse? We're not going to give it more abuse. And that's our inner child. And that's what we need to focus on in the beginning of the healing, is getting rid of the inner critic. That's it. So I hope that's been helpful. And I'll put the links below so anybody watching can say hello if they want. If not, I'm going to sign off and end this video. But thanks for watching. Thank you.